All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Thursday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. As promised, we're doing some game reactions today. We're going to do a deep dive into Cavs-Rockets, which was a super entertaining game from last night. And then we're going to do shorter dives into three other games. The Kings beating the Golden State Warriors, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander getting his career-high 54 points against the Utah Jazz, and then the Boston Celtics winning an exciting overtime game over the Los Angeles Clippers. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at @JasonLT so you guys don't miss any show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. It's also super helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. We also have brand new social media feeds on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook where we're releasing content throughout this season. Make sure you guys follow us there. And then last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in the YouTube comments. We'll have another mailbag tomorrow. We have mailbags on Fridays throughout the season. You can drop those questions for those mailbags in the comments underneath these videos. All right, let's talk some basketball. So super interesting back and forth game in Houston between the Cavs and the Rockets. Cleveland controlled things early until Houston's bench came into the game. And they just completely changed things. Cam Whitmore was insanely good. Tari Eason was good. Jayson Tatum. They do a lot of damage with their rim pressure. And what that means is just like their aggressive athletic moves towards the rim. And this can come through a bunch of different ways. It can come through running your lane in transition. It could come through crashing the offensive glass. It can come through cutting with the basketball or cutting to get the basketball, rolling out of ball screens. There's so many different ways to generate pressure. But the specific thing that Cleveland was struggling with when in this particular one was their athletes coming off of their action downhill. So like getting downhill against Jared Allen in a drop coverage, but you're going so damn fast that everybody reacts to it. And even if you miss the first layup, which they were making a lot of those first layups, even if you miss that first layup, there's just waves of athletes coming in behind, right? It's kind of what Houston does to you. They wear you down with just waves and waves of athleticism. And Houston was actually beating Cleveland pretty bad in the half court in the first half, which is a unusual occurrence for two teams that have these types of strengths and weaknesses. As a matter of fact, in the first half, Houston was getting 1.03 points per possession in the half court. Cleveland was getting only 0.83. So a 20 point per 100 possession advantage in the half court for Houston in the first half. Again, a combination of their great defense as Amen Thompson was giving Donovan Mitchell fits all night, which ended up being one of the defining factors in the late portion of the game. But just in general, them causing a lot of problems for Cleveland with their defense, and then them getting out in transition and then pressuring the rim when they got stuck in the half court. And again, with Houston, there's a certain amount of damage they're going to do to you in transition no matter what, just because they run and they run and they run and they run. And they did have 12 transition points in the first half. And that probably could have been worse because Tari Eason missed a couple of relatively makeable layups in transition. So Houston ends up going in the late second quarter stretch with their first double-digit lead of the game. So again, Cleveland controls early. Houston bench comes in. The athletes kind of take control. Houston goes up 10 in the late second quarter. At that point, the Cavs had only ran a handful of possessions of zone all game and nothing super substantial. And as soon as the Rockets went up 10, Kenny Atkinson went pretty much all in on zone the rest of the game. There's still a good bit of man at different portions of the game, like middle of the third quarter, late third quarter. They played some man, but a lot of zone from that point forward in the game. And the idea there is you're trying to take away the easy opportunities for Houston's athletes to get downhill, because no matter when you have the ball against the zone is always loaded up on you. There's always a rim protector waiting. There's always guys in the gaps. It's difficult to dribble drive against the zone compared to a man-to-man look, right? So it basically puts more of the onus on Houston's weaknesses, right? Like Houston's weaknesses are they don't have a ton of guys that are super reliable knockdown catch and shoot guys, and they're not the most offensively skilled and high offensive IQ type of team. And they're in those zones, you have to break them down with ball and player movement and the ability to knock down shots over the top of the defense. And so Kenny Atkinson was banking on that being what would specifically slow this team down. And they did. Houston struggled with the zone all game. Overall, Houston faced 42 possessions of zone in the game and managed just 31 points. They gave up 0.74 points per possession, Cleveland did, in those 42 possessions of zone. The worst stretch of it by far was in the fourth quarter, a stretch when Steven Adams was on the floor, which was a problem because Şengün, again, like we talked about this a lot, but I think it was in the Lakers Heat game from last week. But there's a certain amount of pressure in the zone that can be relieved if you have somebody who can get the ball into the middle of the zone who's a capable playmaker. Because as soon as you get the ball in the middle of the zone, there's a tendency for all five guys to kind of turn towards you. The big man in the middle almost always steps up. And so there's opportunities for cuts along the baseline, kickouts to the corner. Getting the ball to the middle of the floor to a guy who can actually make plays there is kind of a vital part of breaking down a zone. And so Steven Adams was out there in that fourth quarter stretch. And at one point against Cleveland zone, Houston failed to score on 16 consecutive possessions. Think about how crazy that is. A complete and total offensive breakdown against Cleveland zone. Houston still defended pretty well in this stretch, so they only allowed 19 points in that time, but it was a 19-0 run. So all of a sudden, a 13-point Houston Rockets lead turns into a 6-point Cleveland Cavaliers lead. And it looks like this whole thing is going down in flames. But then finally, somebody for Houston breaks through against Cleveland zone, and that person was Fred VanVleet. Again, the zone, like we talked about, requires you to break it down with good ball and player movement. And guys are going to have to knock down threes. A lot of times the shot you're conceding in a zone is like the skip or the swing from either the opposite wing or from the middle of the floor to the opposite wing, where that guy's going to have to make like a 26-footer, like a little bit outside the three-point line that's kind of contested, a little rushed. That's the kind of shot that a zone is going to give up. And you can't give that up to teams that have super elite shooting because they're just going to hit that shot at a pretty high rate. But again, in this case, Fred VanVleet hits two massive threes, one off of a skip pass in the zone, the other one off of an offensive rebound in the zone, knocks down both threes. Finally, it's tied. Now we're locked in there. I think it was 104-104 if I remember at that point in time. So now we have ourselves a good old-fashioned clutch basketball battle. And in the clutch, Houston's wings just kept getting stop after stop after stop. First, Amen Thompson gets a steal and a foul that puts Houston up by one at the foul line. He was giving Donovan Mitchell fits all night long. He had 19 points on 21 shots. And really, and this will become a theme here down the stretch, the only thing that Donovan Mitchell could do against Amen Thompson was take extremely difficult off-the-dribble jump shots. And he just wasn't able to make them in this game. Darius Garland ends up so Houston goes up one off of the foul shot from Amen Thompson, but then Darius Garland puts the Cavs back up on the left wing with a three on a switch interchange that Houston botches. So like a couple guys linger with Garland, and then one of them thinks, oh, well, I got to get back to my man, except for both of them thought that. So they ran away from Garland. Garland ends up wide open. He hits a three, makes it 107-105. Şengün ties the game. He had won a bunch of big physical battles against Jared Allen down the stretch, and one of the big ones he got in this one, he ducked in the post. It was kind of like a drive from Fred VanVleet where he kind of posed the ball out, and Şengün had been rolling. And when he rolled, he had some pretty decent position. And so he just threw his ass back into Jared Allen, knocked him off his base, and created a nice big passing window for Fred VanVleet. Fred threw it to him, and Jarrett was draped over the top, but Şengün just went up through him, and he was so close to the basket that he really just had to get the ball up in the air and had a really good chance of going in. Makes that layup to make it 107-107. And then from there, that's when Houston just started getting stops. Again, Amen Thompson forces Donovan Mitchell into like this impossible left shoulder fade that has very little chance of going in. And again, the theme here is Mitchell can only get these super difficult off the dribble jump shots. Jalen Green got a big stop against Darius Garland, where Darius Garland tried to go for like a low gather to draw a foul. And like this was a game where like no fouls were getting called until randomly Şengün gets 2 free throws at the end of the game. We'll get to that in a minute. But like there was a lot of contact that was just getting allowed in this game. And so Garland made a mistake, I thought, in trying to like draw a foul with a low gather. Jalen Green ends up forcing the turnover. They go out the other way. And then Amen Thompson forces Donovan Mitchell into another impossible step back three, kind of in the left wing area. Misses again, but on the shot, Alperen Şengün buries Jared Allen to get the rebound and creates the angle, and Jared Allen fouls him. Now, I didn't agree with this call. By the book, technically, but like it was one of those things where this game was kind of a physical bloodbath where everything was getting let go. It was kind of a theme early on in the game. The Rockets broadcast was talking about it quite a bit and how it actually favors Houston, which I agree because they're the bigger, more physical team, especially with Evan Mobley out of the lineup. But Şengün gets 2 foul shots, right? He makes both foul shots. Go out to the other end. Darius Garland gets to the foul line off of a reckless closeout from Tari Eason. He gets 3 free throws and the ball and makes only one of them. And that wasn't even the first time that game he went 1 for 3 on a 3-point shot foul. He went 3 for 8 in the foul line of this game. Really was the difference between a win and a loss for Cleveland in this one. So Cleveland gets the ball back. 1-point game, down 1. Any bucket, they win. But once again, the best shot that Donovan Mitchell could get against Amen Thompson was a really, really difficult right shoulder fade kind of along the baseline that barely grazed the rim. And so, again, Cleveland had their chance, couldn't get a bucket there. Houston ends up getting out of there the win. I don't see too much point in like focusing on the specific result of this game just because there was so much weirdness. Like Evan Mobley was out, Darius Garland missing all those free throws that he usually makes. Houston going as ice cold as they did against his own. In a playoff series, you probably bail on Steven Adams a little bit earlier if that happens. All of those weird foul calls at the end of the game. It was just a weird regular season game that Houston happened to come away with. So that I'm not overly concerned with. I did think the game was super revealing, though, of both Cleveland and Houston's respective strengths and weaknesses. Starting with Houston, their athleticism is just a fucking problem on both ends of the floor. Garland and Mitchell were both really struggling to get separation and get to their spots. Role players were getting spooked. That was the big thing. It felt like Cleveland was getting rushed a lot. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But Georges Niang smoked 2 easy layups on cuts because he was like terrified of Cam Whitmore coming over the top. One, he tried to pump fake and traveled. The other one, he just smoked the layup. Houston had 23 fast break points. They had 20 offensive rebounds. On offense, it was their downhill attack that actually forced Cleveland to kind of default to zone as much as they did. The athleticism for Houston just gives them such an incredibly high floor. And then Şengün is just really good. Like I've seen Jared Allen outplay many of the best centers in the league this year. Again, in a different type of role, but just produce in his role at a higher level than some of his peers at his position have done. I thought Şengün outplayed him last night. The box score numbers were relatively similar. Jared Allen did win some battles. He had, I think, 5 or 6 offensive rebounds, was causing some problems with his tap-out rebounds. He was a big part of Cleveland's third quarter surges that kept the game close, was Jared Allen and the work he was doing on the glass. But Şengün was winning some specific battles. He won some big physical battles, namely that big duck-in on Jared Allen late that tied the game, drawing the foul on the defensive rebound down the stretch. Like he just won some key physical battles. And then there was a difference there too. Like Şengün was generating offense for his team. Jared Allen was finishing plays. And obviously Jared Allen was still very good, but I thought Şengün won that battle. And he's just such a smart offensive player. The duck-in is a great example. Like, oh, I've got good position. We're not really getting anything good right now. I'm just going to bury him right here and see if I can't create an easy shot. There was a play, I clipped this play and put it on my Twitter feed at _JasonLT, but a play where it was against a man-to-man look, if I remember correctly. But Şengün caught it in the post on the left block. I think it was in like the mid to late third quarter stretch. And the Cavs zone up on him. So they zone up from the baseline, meaning like a defender guarding somebody elsewhere on the floor. I think it was Ty Jerome, if I remember correctly, but comes all the way across to the outside the paint and basically zones up on Şengün. And then Fred VanVleet's man, Darius Garland, was digging down. And so Şengün was like posting, but he's looking at 3 bodies. He's looking at body right in front of him, body to the left, body to the right. Jared Allen, I think, was the guy guarding him. And so it looks like like you Lakers fans who listen to the show will recognize this as the way every team guards Anthony Davis in the post, where it's just like complete load up. But Şengün did something really, really smart that got a great shot for his team on this possession. So instead of like trying to probe against 3 defenders right in his face or trying to force a looping skip pass that Cleveland could have easily rotated out of or potentially deflected with ball pressure, he just dribbles out at Fred VanVleet as if he's going to do a dribble handoff with him. As soon as he does this, it triggers a chain of events. Darius Garland, instead of digging down on Şengün, closes out to Fred VanVleet to get into chase position in case he has to chase him over a dribble handoff. Jared Allen just barely gets up out of his stance and slides off to his right to potentially contain a Fred VanVleet drive off of a ball screen. And then Şengün just keeps the ball and drives into the middle of the lane. So he was facing this super loaded up man-to-man look. And just by taking a dribble at Fred VanVleet and then turning back into the lane, he completely shifted Cleveland's defense, forced Garland and Allen to shift into more of a ball screen coverage, which created an opening in the middle of the floor for Şengün to drive at. He drove right at it. Everyone collapsed. Easy kick out pass to Tari Eason on the right wing. He knocks down a three. He's just such a smart offensive player, and he has such a gift for like meandering and making stuff happen in tight space situations. I thought he was absolutely huge in this particular game. The one thing with the Rockets that was on display, though, is just, again, they just lack that like highly refined offensive skill. They had 22 turnovers in this game. They had so many ugly possessions in the half court on offense. So like a pretty good indication, a pretty good demonstration of Houston's strengths and weaknesses last night. And then with Cleveland, the big thing that stood out to me, that they're definitely not as athletic as some of these teams at the top of the league. And it causes them, when they run into that sort of team, to rush things a little bit. I've seen this in specifically the first game on the road in Boston, the one on the road in Oklahoma City, and then this one, where they have these stretches where they kind of lose composure and start taking bad shots, not trusting the things that caused them to succeed earlier in the season. I talked about Mitchell forcing things against Oklahoma City. I thought he looked similar to that last night, just kind of taking extremely difficult shots against elite perimeter defenders. Darius Garland was missing some reads. Like, there were about a half dozen possessions in this game. I clipped several of them and put them on my Twitter feed, but there were about a half dozen possessions in this game where he took like pretty tough contested twos while there were easy kickout reads available for good shooters. So the kind of reads he had been making all season, but he just looked rushed. You know, that was kind of the story of the game for me. He looked rushed. Like Georges Niang looked rushed on those layups. In general, the team didn't shoot well from three. Max Strus and Dean Wade went 3 for 10. Sam Merrill was 1 for 6 and had some really ugly misses, like some bricks that damn near put a hole in the backboard. Just something to keep an eye on. Like, I've seen them handle athletic pressure well and execute and make shots at stretches, but I've also seen them handle athletic pressure poorly and lose composure. And I think that'll be one of their like kind of oscillating back and forth team characteristics that we see in the postseason when they lose games versus when they win games. Will probably center around whether or not they can remain composed against more athletic teams. But I really thought they won the chess match in this one. Shout out to Kenny Atkinson in terms of their on-the-fly adjustments. They executed really well, and they had a great chance to win. And again, like overall, I thought it was a pretty impressive Cavs performance. Like that's a tough Houston team to beat, especially in Houston. Evan Mobley being out is a pretty substantial loss, and you probably win that game if Darius Garland doesn't miss 5 free throws. So overall, pretty encouraging from the Cleveland Cavaliers. From the football playoffs to college and pro basketball to the rush of hockey, what a time to be a sports fan. It's all happening, and you can get in on all the action of the sports you love at DraftKings Sportsbook. With so many sports, every day is game day at DraftKings. That means unlimited opportunities to place your first bet, and DraftKings makes it easy. How easy? Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, pick your team, and place your bet. The NBA championship odds are starting to get tight. The Boston Celtics are still the favorite at plus 245, but the Oklahoma City Thunder right on their heels at plus 255. And to help you get started, here's something special for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. It's code HOOPS, HOOPS, for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. DraftKings, the crown is yours. All right, we're going to hit 3 more games, but it's going to be a little bit more of a rapid fire kind of style. So, first of all, how can we be sure that Steph can't lead a championship team when this is what he's working with? The Kings last night followed a game plan that many teams in the NBA have employed over the last couple of years against Steph Curry. Let's just get the ball out of Steph's hands. Let's pressure him. Let's top block him. Let's deny him. Let's blitz him on every ball screen. Let's shade heavy towards him on every drive. Let's just overplay him and make all of these fringe NBA players beat us. And for most of the night, it actually didn't work. Sacramento allowed an astonishing 20 unguarded catch-and-shoot jump shots, which is a lot to give up in any single game. Golden State made 11 of them and led by as much as 18 in this game. That was a big part of the early story of this game. It was a long-term investment. You gave up a bunch of open looks. You gave up an early lead to Golden State, But a very important thing happened. Steph was out of rhythm on the offensive end of the floor. He took just 11 shots. He had 12 assists, but he had just 14 points. And so as the game progressed, Sacramento got a little sharper with their rotations. The open shots were fewer and further between. I think 14 of the 20 open shots they conceded were in the first half. And nobody in a Golden State uniform felt comfortable when we ended up in crunch time. All the role players were out of rhythm as Sacramento's defensive intensity picked up. Again, this is a team that has been really, really good on defense in this span. They're 6th in defense in their last 11 games. They made all the Golden State role players feel uncomfortable, and now we're in crunch time, and Steph doesn't have any sort of rhythm or anything in his game going at that point in time. And it just led to an absolutely brutal finish on offense for the Warriors. They were up by 4 on a Wiggins 3 with 4 minutes left. The Warriors did not score over the next 3 minutes and change, and the game slipped away from them in that span. DeMar DeRozan got a bucket over Guy Santos. Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox kept getting to the foul line with their rim pressure, and then they iced the game in the final minute. De'Aaron Fox hit a little mid-range jump shot, and Malik Monk had a driving layup, and that ended up putting the game away. So the Kings trusted their defensive game plan. They didn't overreact to guys making shots early in the game, and it ended up working out in their favor as they got a huge win. The Kings are now 10-1 in their last 11 games, 5th in offense, 6th in defense. Just absolutely killing teams in clutch situations like this. In that 11-game span, they've played 6 clutch games. In those 6 clutch games, they're 6-0. Malik Monk and DeMar DeRozan have made 17 of their 32 shot attempts in the clutch over that span. As a team, we talked about them being elite on offense and defense in the large sample over that span. In clutch situations, they have a 135 offensive rating and an 80 defensive rating in those 6 clutch wins. The Kings, and this is such a great example of what I've been talking about all year with respect to the Western Conference and not getting too high and getting too low. I don't think you could have been much lower than the Utah Jazz looked at the end of that, than the Sacramento Kings looked at the end of that ugly stretch that they had a little over, or about a month ago, right? It looked like things were legitimate. Like we were talking about De'Aaron Fox trades. That's how bad it got, right? And now the Kings are up to 7th in the Western Conference standings and just 1 game back of the 5 seed. Pretty wild turnaround. And clearly just taking to the new voice in the room. Doug Christie, this is something like I've talked about a lot as it pertains to like even the move from Frank Vogel to Darvin Ham with the Lakers. Like there are many different reasons to potentially change your coach. And one of them is like sometimes the same guy preaches at you for so many years, you just get sick of him. And you just need to hear a different voice. And that appears to be something that has helped the Sacramento Kings team get back on track. But I wanted to briefly hit on that Warriors closing group. The Warriors closed this game with Guy Santos and Quentin Post on the floor. I don't understand how we could possibly gauge what this team is or isn't capable of, or what Steph is or isn't capable of when he's playing with fringe NBA players due to injuries. When Jonathan Kuminga's out, when Gary Payton's out, when Draymond Green's out, different guys have been in and out of the lineup all season long. When Brandon Podziemski's out, when these guys have been out with injuries, we're seeing a depleted team that already had a top-end talent issue. So I'm hoping that they can get their main guys out there again before the deadline and get a big win or two just to convince the front office to invest in this team. Here's one crazy stat for you guys. Golden State has 7 wins this year against teams that are in the top 10 in point differential. That is the 5th most in the entire NBA. That is the same amount as Boston. That is more than teams like Denver or the Lakers or the Memphis Grizzlies. There is a top end here that we haven't seen in a while due to injuries and some funks, and even Steph's a little banged up. But I'm hoping that this team makes a resurgence at some point this year because I really want to see Steph play in some high-leverage basketball games, and this team is going to need to make some sort of talent upgrade at the deadline for that to be the case. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander put another feather in his MVP cap last night at home against a Utah Jazz team that, thanks to Will Hardy, was nice enough to kind of let Shai work in traditional coverages and one-on-one all night long, regardless of how hot he got. And Shai delivered his career high as a result. He had 54 points, just a ridiculous jump shooting display. He took 20 jump shots in this game, made 10 of them, just kept getting to his spots with a variety of different moves and footwork and dribble combinations and just hitting a ton of them. He's now shooting 45% on all jump shots this season. 56% inside of 17 feet, 50% on jump shots between 17 feet and the three-point line. And then supplemented it with a bunch of easy stuff at the rim and at the foul line. He looks like a player that is in complete control of his game all the time. He never looks rushed or pressured. He's reaching a really special place as a guard in this league. And interestingly enough, according to DraftKings, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has now moved to minus 500 to win MVP. That is a massive favorite. I think he deserves it, and it will be a nice precursor to his first playoff run with some real championship pressure. All right, last game for today. The Celtics win a thriller in Los Angeles against the Clippers. The Clippers gave the Celtics a bunch of issues with kind of like these freaky modern lineups with a bunch of wings who can switch and pressure the ball and fly around and transition in rotation. And they caused some problems for the Celtics. They sent the game to OT with that pressure. They forced a couple of turnovers. They got a chicken wing offensive foul call. Then they trapped Jaylen Brown, which forced him to just throw the ball directly to Derrick Jones, who immediately pushed it down the floor in transition and got a layup to send it to overtime. But they settled down in overtime and played some Celtics basketball. Got an easy three for Derek White on the left wing off of a slipped switch. This is something that, again, Boston does a lot. Jaylen Brown came off the screen with Cornette. Two guys stuck with the ball for a minute, floated over the top to Cornette. We got a weak side 2-on-1, skipped out to Derek White, hit it above the break three. I talked 2 days ago about Jayson Tatum and how I really like his off-the-dribble threes when he gets separation versus when he doesn't. And like he hit Kobe Brown with a snatchback dribble and got lots of separation and didn't have to step too far back behind the line. It was like a classic little 24-footer and knocked that one down. Jaylen Brown hit a huge three. Jaden Springer hit a huge three. He hit 2 big threes in this game. He was great. He played great defense. I thought he had some really awesome defensive reps against Kevin Porter Jr. in this game. And then icing the game, Nimi Quato with the layup right underneath the basket as Jayson Tatum, again, the Clippers finally got sick of it and just started doubling. And they double Tatum out at half court. A nice little passing sequence leads to a layup for Quato, and he ends up icing the game. The Celtics get consecutive wins for the first time since January 3rd. And now they have an opportunity against the Lakers tonight. We'll be covering that game either tonight or tomorrow morning. I'm not sure yet. But a nice little spurt for the Celtics as they try to get back on track. One little tiny negative note that I wanted to just call attention to. Late in the game, the Celtics centers ended up giving up some drives. Both Luke Cornette and Nimi Quato gave up driving layups. Quato gave up a driving dunk to Amir Coffey, right? The one before Derrick Jones Jr. bucket. And it's just a reminder that like a big part of what makes this team work is that they have pretty good defensive personnel all over the floor at all times and a scheme that works for all their different lineups. And there is a little bit of a tendency for their backup centers, guys like Quato, guys like Cornette, to have some trouble in space guarding speed. And it's just something to keep in mind that if Boston were to end up against a great team in a playoff series and have some injury issues with Porzingis and Horford, that is a slight area of vulnerability on the roster to keep an eye on. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting me and supporting the show. We'll be back tomorrow with a mailbag as well as some game reactions. I will see you guys then.